You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. Before we get started, the Bills played on Thursday, so we had our Victory Friday. We obviously weren't on the air for it, but we celebrated it. And, we get to celebrate Victory Monday all over again because the Buffalo Bills are once again atop the AFC, and they are once again atop the AFC East. So got this little clip for everybody on this Monday evening.
Terry just texted me to smile.
So welcome in Terry Pagula, texting everybody a smile this evening as the Buffalo Bills are once again in first place in the AFC. We got a big show for you tonight. Just a quick rundown of everything we're going to talk about, and there is a lot. The Bills improved to 9-3 with a 24-10 win over the New England Patriots. The win, coupled with the Chiefs and Dolphins losing, have the Bills once again in first place in both the AFC East and the AFC. OBJ has visited with the Giants, the Bills, and is now in Dallas. He's expected to make his decision this week on who his next team will be. The Bills will be taking on the Jets at home this Sunday, 1 p.m. matchup. CBS blocked this game from Sunday Night Football, so Jim Nantz and Tony Romo will be on the call. And Bills Dolphins on 12/17 has been flexed to Saturday night, prime time on NFL Network. So we're gonna get to all of these things tonight. We got a jam-packed show, but let's start with Bills Pats. What are some of your initial final thoughts that you have on this game?
Well, I predicted a close score in the pregame show, and so I was pleasantly surprised that, really throughout the game, outside of that early stretch where, the Pats did have that sort of, I don't want to call it lucky play, but the play to Marcus Jones where they kind of broke the Bills defense and took the lead momentarily. Other than that, it didn't ever feel like the Bills were not in control of the game, to be honest. The defense played great. It was great seeing Tremaine Edmonds back in the mix, making his presence felt. And the Bills played a really clean game on offense. Obviously, one of the big storylines coming out of the game was the usage of James Cook and sort of how he outpaced Devin Singletary on the ground and snap count. So that's something we're going to look to see how that develops as we head into this next game against the Jets. But a clean game on offense, right? There was the one holding play by our favorite 53-man roster placeholder, Tommy Sweeney, on the holding. But hey, clean game on offense. Diggs did his thing. James Cook and Devin Singletary did this thing. Josh Allen obviously had the one fumble, but no interceptions and a pretty clean game where the Bills really dominated time of possession and really the backbreaker with that 9-minute 15-play drive. It was nice to see the Bills. It was very reminiscent of the game they had against the Patriots last year, late in the season, where they really dominated the time of possession and took what the defense gave them. And it felt a lot like that. And I think they needed this type of game to head. They needed this type of game to kind of rattle off any last bit of maybe confidence issues or whatever you want to call it. And now getting the extra rest in between to try to get guys healthy and get Josh Allen's elbow even a little bit healthier, I think it is a really nice kind of takeaway from that game.
Yeah, Jessica 10 says it felt like a team practice for the Bills, and it did feel that way a little bit. I was trying to think of what the game felt like as I was watching it. I had to watch it on a little bit of a tape delay, but as I was watching, I'm like, well, what does this game remind me of? What does this game remind me of? And the one word I kept thinking of was it was just sort of a workman-like game for the Buffalo Bills. They just came out. They were the better team. They knew they were the better team. And they did just enough to comfortably dominate without it ever becoming sort of a blowout. So it was also impressive to me that there was no collapse after, with all the seemingly poor pass protection too. The end of the first half fumble was really the only bad play of the game. Questenberry, who came into the game got hurt on like the first play of the game, re-injured that ankle. He was getting cooked. But it didn't derail the Bills offense like, say, 2021 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The offense was able to move the football consistently. They were able to put up enough points, and then they relied on that defense that's so good of theirs to secure the victory. But the line needs to be better, but that was somewhat reassuring that even without Deion Dawkins, we could still move the football against what is a very good Patriots defense.
Yeah, I mean, going into the game, we know the Pats are ranked really highly in DVOA defense and not so highly on offense, and that's kind of how the game played out, to be honest. The Bills were able to do enough damage to that Pats defense and really were pretty efficient moving the ball, a lot of possessions in this game for the Bills offense. And the Pats defense really didn't have much of an answer with the Bills getting that lead. That Pats offense was really behind the eight ball and like really didn't have a chance to kind of keep things close. So Bills kind of took Ramondre Stevenson out of the game. I mean, he had a couple nice runs there in the second half, but like for the most part, they forced Mac Jones to beat them with a little bit of a banged up receiving core. We know Jacoby Myers wasn't 100% coming into the game, and it looked as much. And so let's not forget as well that the Bills had Tremaine Edmonds back in the middle, as I mentioned before, and I think again had a really nice game. I mean, I don't know what else to say now. I made a comment about Tremaine Edmonds during the game on Twitter about how like the haters need to sit down, and I still had people coming in being like, "What? Because he made 2 good plays?" I'm like, really? Come on now. Like, let's be objective here. Like, he has made a difference when he's played, and you can clearly see a difference when with this defense when he's not playing. So, tip of the cap to Tremaine.
Yeah, we're gonna dive a little deeper into Tremaine in a little bit, but another thing that I like to see returning to the Buffalo Bills was some window dressing on offense. Isaiah McKenzie, James Cook, Naheem Hines, they were all utilized. Khalil Shakir had a catch. It's almost like, 2 games in 10 days with 1 real practice was sort of an issue for the Buffalo Bills. And they had a full week of practice to clean some things up. And you saw Ken Dorsey get a little bit of creative. He brought back some of the motions and some of the window dressings, that we're used to, or at least we were used to under Brian Dable. So that was a good thing to see from the Buffalo Bills offense as well. Just a little sprinkle of some creativity, because it didn't seem like that game at all was let Josh Allen drop back and make a playoff script, except for his touchdown to Gabriel Davis.
His touchdown to Gabriel Davis, and even like the run he had up the middle where he kind of like half hurdled, like that clearly looked like it was a scripted type of run. But yes, the Gabriel Davis play, I mean, that's the type of stuff where when he does go off script and it's not having to happen on every single play, I think it actually puts the defense at more stress on the defense when it's not on every single play, because it's like there's less pressure on him to deliver, and like there's just natural sort of special moments that happen. So yeah, for sure.
All right. Before we dive into some statistics and pick our superlatives of the week for this game, this show is sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980, that hand cup and char pepperoni. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into the game here. What was your stat of the week for this football game? What statistic stood out to you the most?
Well, there's a lot of things you can look at, but I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing that stood out the most to me was 6 receptions for James Cook. And I know like people are going to say, well, why is that the thing that stands out the most? I mean, the Bills obviously ran it again well, 132 yards on the ground. But for me, James Cook getting really involved and kind of showing that improvement in helping his quarterback out from that Lions game to this game. Eric did a great job breaking down some of the plays around, him leaning one way or the other on some of these passing plays and just really helping Josh out, always making himself available. 6 receptions for James Cook to me was a big deal in this game, on top of the fact that he ran the ball for 64 yards as well. So you look at James Cook, 100 total yards combined, receiving and running, to me is a big deal and a big development as you start to see, comfortable looking 6 catches, easy completions. None of those look stressful. Some good yard after the catch on some of those. And other than the turf monster taking him down a few times, which I thought was a little amusing, I do think it's a little bit of him kind of protecting himself in some of those situations as well, and kind of getting used to the speed of the game as this goes forward. But looked very comfortable with his hands catching the ball. And again, over 100 total yards for James Cook, to me, is a developing statistical storyline as we go forward here to this home stretch of games, and seeing how, if that becomes the norm, because we talked about how he had the 86 yards 2 weeks ago against the Browns, then kind of disappeared against the Lions, and then came back again against the Pats. So the consistency is something I think Bills fans are going to be looking for from James Cook going forward, but this was a really big step in the right direction. So that was kind of my, I don't know if I would call it under the radar statistic of the game, but definitely something that I thought was noteworthy.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was noteworthy, because that was my number one as well. 14 carries for 64 yards, 6 catches for 41 yards. In terms of touches, James Cook had 20 touches. He touched the football 20 times in this game, to Devin Singletary's 13. Motor did out snap James Cook, but it was only 33 to 32. We may finally be seeing RB1 James Cook take over here, as Brian Bowers says in the comment section that we've been talking about for a few weeks now. Is this a passing of the torch, or was this a flash in the pan 1 week thing? What do you think?
I'm not ready to say it's a passing of the torch yet, because every time I feel like I'm ready to pass the torch, Devin Singletary comes back with a big game, and it's this is kind of what happened from the Browns to the Lions game, or Vikings to the Lions game, to the Browns to the Lions. And until it becomes a more consistent usage week to week, I'm not ready to pass the torch yet. But I also would say this: I don't know that it's a torch passing situation, right? I think it's kind of like that whole debate we had a couple years back, where it was going to be does it really matter who starts? Does it really matter if one guy outsnaps the other? I think it's let's put these guys in the best position for them to succeed as far as utilizing their strengths. And clearly that's been Cook a little bit in the passing game and running some of those mid and duo zone concepts that Eric had mentioned. And then Devin Singletary doing a little bit more of those wide zone concepts. And that's, I think, the key, right? Is putting these guys in the position to succeed where they're at their best, and what the defense is going to give them, and kind of leaning on some of the film work before the game, and kind of figuring out the defensive tendencies, and then utilizing those backs where they feel like they can really take advantage of those defensive tendencies. So a long way of saying I'm not ready to pass the torch yet, but man, James Cook has been impressive, including running in between the tackles, by the way.
Yeah, great comment here. It says, I think it's an upside downside question. Cook's ceiling is higher and his floor is catching up with Motor. So I like that comment. I think Brian Bowers might be hitting on something here. Singletary won't be back next season. A lot of free agents, a lot of draft guys in the draft. There could be a situation where it's actually pretty affordable to bring Singletary back. But if James Cook keeps stepping up the way he is, who knows? Maybe the Buffalo Bills want to transition to an offense that's focused around James Cook at running back. And then Pete Dan had a great comment saying, hey, this very well could have been matchup based to deal with in part with the speed, or the lack of speed, of the New England Patriots linebackers. One other statistic that stood out to me, and this one in a not so positive light, in a negative light: Dawson Knox, 1 target, no catches. I get that we need him to be an inline blocker, especially Thursday when Deion Dawkins was out. But I mean, come on, you're seriously giving a guy $14 million per season to be a blocking first tight end? What are your thoughts on now 2 weeks in a row, after we had that one good week, 2 weeks now in a row of very little usage of Dawson Knox?
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, what, 12 games now into the
Yeah.
season? Like it's not an anomaly anymore, right? Like this is the trend
Mhm.
of Dawson Knox's season, for better or for worse. And I don't think we can say, oh, like Ken Dorsey's saving him or this or that. Like it's 12 games in,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we're not scheming things open for him. We're not giving him easy catches early in games. These are things that you can script for Dawson Knox early in games to get him
Mhm.
involved, get his like he is definitely a guy that feeds on having the ball in his hand and initiating contact with defenders after the catch. And if he's not doing that early in games, I feel like you're doing a little bit of a disservice, right?
Mhm.
So, and I agree, Jessica, as long as the Bills win, but I think that people are going to look at this situation and see how much money the Bills invested in
Yeah.
Dawson Knox's contract and wonder like what's going on? Why is he
It's not
not
so
more a
much
part of the
It's not so much
offense?
about the now. That's great. But what happens when this contract costs you Jordan Poyer, or this contract costs you Tremaine Edmonds or Ed Oliver? Like, so it's more of a sort of down the road, topic a little bit. But at the end of the day, like, you pay this guy $14 million. He needs to be more than a blocker, because you could have gone out and you could have paid Durham Smythe $3 million to do what Dawson Knox is doing right now. And that's not Dawson Knox's fault. Like, there are some people who on social media are like, well, Dawson Knox got his bag and now he's done trying. Like, that's bullshit. And that's bullshit. You're just looking for attention on the internet. This isn't on Dawson Knox. This is on Ken Dorsey needing to figure out a way to get him implemented in the offense, because I'm not saying he needs to be Travis Kelce, but if you're paying him $14 million, he can't be a bona fide blocking tight end and be getting one target a game. Like, that's not sustainable long term into the Buffalo Bills future, because when we start losing guys because of that contract, we'll need him to be bigger and to step up and play more of a role.
We'll need him to play more of a role. And as you get to the playoffs,
Mhm.
right, like we need to be a little bit more diversified with the offense. Now, it's been good lately between the running game and the passing game as far as that's concerned, but
Mhm.
you need to be able to, if things aren't working, let's say with the receivers in in a playoff game, like you need to be able to turn to something else at a moment's notice.
Mhm.
And as Ned says, he hasn't used them effectively. And as Pete said, which I agreed with 100%, there is not a great reason to not draw up catches for Knox.
Yeah.
And teams do this all the time with lesser tight ends, right? I mean, you see teams like the New York Giants drawing up plays for Daniel Bellinger, who just came back from an eye injury. Teams are able to scheme up plays for their tight ends, and you have to point at Ken Dorsey as
Mhm.
the main culprit. I'm not saying he's the only culprit, but he's got to be the main culprit right now in this discussion.
Before we get to the drive of the day, I have one sort of similar topic that I want to talk about here. And this is one that's pretty controversial on social media right now. It's
Mm.
either people are pretty ticked off, or people are telling people to stop being so ticked off, and that to trust the Bills and to trust the process. So there's really like there's no middle ground in this conversation. People on social media are very much heated on one way or heated on the other. And that's Kyer Elam being healthy and active over Xavier Rhodes against the New England Patriots on Thursday. Rhodes was targeted 6 times. He surrendered 4 catches for 44 yards, allowed 8 yards after the catch. He pretty much just went out there against a very bad New England passing offense, and did his job. After the game, McDermott said he just wanted to get a look at him. And then today, Leslie Frazier said the reason why he got an extended run was because Dane Jackson was sick and missed practice time. Sean McDermott's reasoning makes no sense. Leslie Frazier's reasoning makes no sense. If Dane Jackson was sick, why wasn't Kyer Elam active in Dane Jackson not playing? Like, just nothing the Bills are saying makes sense, which leaves it up to people to speculate what's going on. And that's where you start to get, like me, I'm pulling an A. Geary. I'm pissed. I'm mad. I don't even care if it's irrational. Like, our first round pick is sitting a game against the New England Patriots because you want to see what some 10-year veteran cornerback can do. No, I want to get my first round pick some reps. Like, give me a break. That's where I am right now. I'm fumingly mad. Where do you stand right now with Kyer Elam's benching? Because that's what it was. It was a benching.
What annoys me is people saying, "Oh, well, maybe it's not the best matchup for him," or, "Oh, we can only dress 48 guys on game day. There's got to be someone inactive." It shouldn't be that guy. Like, it shouldn't be your first round pick. Like, it shouldn't be him. And if you're scared because of the matchup in the situation, then then that tells me you shouldn't have picked the guy. Like, if you don't trust him. I don't think the Jets are sitting Sauce Gardner because they don't like a certain matchup. The Jets didn't sit Sauce Gardner because they didn't like the fact that he might have to go up against Justin Jefferson this past weekend. Like, I'm not trying to say Kaiir Elam, Sauce Gardner, but man, first round pick in a room where you're not 100% with Trey White yet. He's still coming back. Dane Jackson had his struggles. Christian Benford's out. Like, to me, there is no excuse, and it's almost like Sean McDermott's playing the veteran card like almost too much to the extreme, in my opinion. And he's done this in the past. And look, no coach is perfect. We know even guys like Andy Reid and others have had questionable decisions that they've made across their tenures as head coaches. And one of the things that I think we and a lot of people sometimes question Sean McDermott about is his inability to give rookies early playing time in their careers. And like, he did it with Kaiir Elam, he did it with AJ Epinesa, maybe less so with Ed Oliver, but even still early on in Ed Oliver's career, he wasn't like getting all the snaps. So it's fair to question it, right? And I know people are going to justify it, right? They're going to justify it, but I'm finding a hard time to justify it because he did play pretty well in the snaps that he had against the Lions.
Yeah, like Ned's coming in saying, wonder if something happened in the locker room. Jessica saying, my speculation is team rules, only thing that really makes sense. And that's the thing too, right? We really think the guy who on Bills embedded this year, the Bills drafted him because he brought his playbook, or he brought his notebook to the combine, and he was saying and doing all these things at the combine that was like completely wired to the Bills DNA. We all of a sudden think that changes like 6 months later, like something changed and he did something. Like, I highly doubt that. Like, Kaiir Elam got into no trouble at Florida. He was always known as sort of that, processy type of guy. So again, like,
we'll probably
they're the ones leaving it up to speculation. Like, people are speculating now, and the Buffalo Bills did it by being piss poor at their ability to communicate why he's not playing. And I'm a little upset at the beat reporters for not pressing it. Like today, when Leslie Frazier said Dane Jackson was sick, and that's why Xavier Rhodes got a lot of run. Why did no one follow that up with, well, why didn't Kaiir Elam play for Dane Jackson? Why did no one bring up Dane Jackson's advanced statistics and all of the dozens of targets and yards and touchdowns he's given up over the past 3 weeks, and asked why Leslie Frazier believes that guy deserves to start more than Kaiir Elam or be active more than Kaiir Elam? Nobody questioned it. They just moved along. They got their soundbite. They got their thing to tweet online, and then they moved on. Like, no one pressed the issue with either Sean McDermott or Leslie Frazier. And many people will say, well, they're just going to keep repeating what they say. At least have the balls to question it. Like, the lack of questioning it really ticked me off too. Like, just anyway, we'll move on. But just the responses from the coaches and the lack of pushback from the beat guys, it really ticked me off. Because to me, this is the one thing. Like, we got the W, but this is the one thing that's gnawing at me this week after the W is we are just sitting more draft picks, high draft picks. Guys that could be contributing to this football team that have been riddled with injuries all year are sitting on the bench and they're not playing. And it just confuses me. And it happens year after year after year with Buffalo Bills high draft picks. But drive of the day for me, let's get back to the positive here. For me was the second quarter, 10 plays, 60 yards, ended in the Stefon Diggs touchdown. It put the Buffalo Bills up 10-7. To me, getting the lead back after that big play touchdown was huge. What do you think of that drive, and what was your drive of the game?
Yeah, I mean, most people are going to point to that 15-play, 94-yard drive in the fourth quarter that eventually sealed the deal and put us up 24-7. But like at that point there, I didn't feel like there was like a real threat that New England was going to come back. Now that would probably go down as the drive of the game, as far as like that was the finisher, right? I like the one you picked because it gave the Bills the lead. And then the other one I think that I really kind of was putting in consideration was the drive after the Bills took the lead 10-7, force the quick 3-and-out, and then come back with another 14-play, 56-yard drive, not a huge yards per
Mm-hmm.
play drive, but that was the one that ended in the Gabe Davis touchdown in the corner with Josh kind of throwing from air
Mm-hmm.
being airborne and putting the Bills up 2 scores. I thought really was an important drive. That was a third down play, and the Bills obviously had put a ton of plays together on that drive, even though it was a shorter yardage drive, but it put them up
Mm-hmm.
2 scores. And I think from that point, feeling pretty comfortable about the game. So yours that you picked, I think giving the Bills
Yeah.
the lead, really important. Obviously the 15 play one in the fourth was huge as well. But I'm sorry, I keep saying the fourth. It was in the third quarter,
Mm-hmm.
so I apologize for that. But for me, it was the Gabe Davis touchdown drive because obviously capped by the great play. But that was the one that put the Bills up 2
Yeah.
scores, and from there, it was fairly comfortable
Yeah.
for most of the day.
After that, it honestly seemed like I think maybe the Nick Folk field goal, and then coming out of halftime, it really looked like the Patriots had just given up. And it was nice to see the second half Buffalo Bills come back to life too, dominating the second half, only allowing 3 points in the second half to the New England Patriots. So that was good to see as well. How about your player of the game? Who is your player of the game? Who do you think stood out to you the most? Who deserves the most recognition? The MVP of this football game.
I mean, it's probably the guy I already mentioned, and that's James Cook. Like, I mean, it's easy to say Josh Allen. It's easy to say
Yeah.
Stefon Diggs. And I think that if you were really going to give a player of the game, it probably would be Stefon Diggs. But I'm going to give mine to James Cook. I think it's a couple of those big runs. Obviously, had the big 28-yard run and then the 6 catches. Like, I think the reason James Cook is the player of the game is because the Bills did something that they really hadn't done outside of maybe a handful of times this year, and was really being methodical and kind of controlling the ball for most of the game and showing a new side of the offense that they hadn't shown before with getting James Cook involved in the passing game. And it was like, a lot of the like historically involvement of the Bills backs a lot of times, at least for Devin Singletary's tenure, have been more out into the flats. So it was nice to see James Cook getting a little bit more vertical in the passing game, although still close to the line of scrimmage, don't get me wrong, but like vertical to where at the point of catch, he's already gained yards, right? Whereas in the past, I think a lot of Devin Singletary's catches have been out to the sides and out to the flats. So I'm going James Cook for my player of the game, man, as a, guy who probably would never get a player of the game in this scenario, but I'm going to give it to him from my perspective.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going with Tremaine Edmonds. He was targeted 3 times. He allowed 2 catches for 9 yards. He had 7 tackles, and he had 2 run stops. To me, he set the tone for that defense, and he was a big reason why the defense was so successful in this game. And we had conversations for like 20 minutes on the pregame show about Ramondre Stevenson and how good of a football player he was. And, Tremaine Edmonds, he took away the middle of the football field from Mac Jones. Guy like Hunter Henry never had a chance to take off. And I don't want to say the Patriots were bad on the ground because they got theirs, but they certainly didn't control the game on the ground, and they were forced to put the ball in the air, and they weren't very successful when they had to do that. So I think Tremaine Edmonds made a huge, huge difference in the way this defense performed.
Absolutely. I mean, and ultimately the Pats, I would say they didn't really get theirs. 60 rushing yards. It was their, I think going into the game, they had only run for over 100 yards in one of their last 6. So now one of their last 7. And I had kind of made the comment that it felt like they were a better running team than they really are, which they really weren't. And the Bills contained, for the most part, Ramondre Stevenson out of the backfield as a pass catcher, which to me was the thing that I was like definitely more concerned about. I mean, he had 6 catches, but only for 24 yards. So didn't really do a ton of damage to you coming out of the backfield, which was really nice to see, so.
Yeah. I got a couple other things that really stood out to me as interesting. I liked Diggs versus Jonathan Jones, 5 catches on 6 targets for 64 yards, 5 first downs and a touchdown. I joked on Twitter that Stefon Diggs holds grudges for his best friend, Josh Allen, and Jonathan Jones was the player that knocked Josh Allen out of the game with a concussion a couple of years back. So Stefon Diggs has been holding it in, and he finally got a chance to go a mano-a-mano with Jonathan Jones and just absolutely cooked him. Trey White was targeted 4 times. He allowed 3 completions for 21 yards, and only 5 yards after the catch. So Diggs and White both looked good. Anything else stick out to you, or any comments on Trey White or Stefon Diggs' game?
I mean, Stefon Diggs just continues to make catch after catch with his hands, gets up, holding the ball, just like with one hand, like just absolutely a stud. Made some really tough catches too, by the way.
Yeah.
And when I say tough, it was a mixture of catches where he was getting popped. The very first one of the game that he caught got popped pretty good. And then a couple others on third down. Obviously, the one where he went up, Josh put a really, really nice ball, kind of rolled over and kind of rolled up with just holding the ball in one hand. Made the really, important catch on that short yardage situation where they kind of hot routed to that quick slant he had, and then a couple others. But Diggs just, I mean, there was the one play where I think he dropped it that he kind of blamed himself, but I mean, you can't complain about this guy. I mean, the pace that he's on is ridiculous. And man, when you need a play and when the Bills needed a play, he was there to make it. And so hats off to him.
Mike H says, anybody look at next year's salary cap space? We better win it this year. The Bills can free up about $50-60 million in cap space, like no problem, within like the first week of the offseason. So the Buffalo Bills should be fine when it comes to the offseason. And then I believe after this offseason, the new TV deals and everything kick in. So Brandon Beane, he is starting to get into New Orleans Saints territory where he's kicking cans down the road. But I think he's being relatively smart so far in the way he's doing it. And the salary cap picture, NFL, it's very complicated. It's not as bad as it looks on Spot Track and on paper right now. The Bills can easily free up a ton of money this offseason. Jessica Tennis comes in and says, so glad no one said Shaq Lawson shouldn't make the 53-man roster. I'll take my L there. I'll take it my L. This offseason, I said, listen, I'm hearing the words Mike Love and Kingsley Jonathan more than Shaq Lawson. And Shaq Lawson wasn't really a factor until midway through the preseason. And I said a couple of times, does he make this 53-man roster? His contract isn't very much like guaranteed. It's not a contract of someone who looks like they have to stick around beyond September. But sure enough, he makes the team. He started rounding into form late in the preseason, made the team, and I mean his game was awesome on Thursday, and he's been an integral part to this football team. Some data here about the Buffalo Bills defensive line. Oliver, Jones, and Phillips combined for 7 pressures and 7 hurries. Shaq Lawson, 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a hit. Boogie Basham, 2 pressures, 2 hits, 2 pressures, 2 hurries, 1 hit. AJ Epinesa, 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a sack. Gregory Rousseau, 4 pressures, 3 hurries, 1 hit. In totality, the Buffalo Bills defensive line, 21 pressures, a sack, 3 hits, 17 hurries. Outside of a couple of plays where they blitzed, including that one where it got blown up and Marcus Jones went to the house, Jones was flustered from start to finish, mostly with 4 guys rushing him. It was a little disappointing he wasn't sacked more, but it was a dominant performance from the Buffalo Bills defensive line, as it should have been, because that New England Patriots offensive line was beat up and bad.
It was, and you could see Rousseau's impact right away. Made a really nice tackle on Ramondre Stevenson early in the game, where had Ramondre gotten through on the right side, there was a lot of daylight in front, and Rousseau just calmly makes the tackle, making his presence felt. The pass rush was there, and if you just look at the box score, you're going to say like, whoa, they only sacked Mac Jones 1 time. But at the end of the day, those plays where they got Mac Jones flustered and off his spot and he was scrambling around, it did look pretty funny, I might add, just like watching the Bills guys just
it was
the Bills players
fun.
just like
it was funny. It was funny up to the point where Jordan Phillips literally hurt himself diving for Mac Jones. Then it got sad.
Then it wasn't, but he didn't make them pay on it. Like Mac Jones didn't make the Bills pay on any of those. There was never any like real positive play that came out of any of those plays. So yeah, it would have been nice to see him take him down a few more times, but man, like he had nowhere to go with the ball when he got that pressure. And that was because the Bills were getting home without blitzing, as you mentioned. So really not much, and them holding up on the back end. So yeah, nice job by the front, obviously, without Von Miller. So nice to see them still getting that pressure, which they should have been, as you mentioned, with that beat up offensive line.
Anything else? Any final thoughts as we head into sort of whipping around the NFL, talking about some of the games like the 49ers and the Chiefs.
Final thought was interesting that Belichick basically waved the white flag with all of his timeouts left with a little under 2 minutes to go. Just said, fuck it, let's get out of here. Thought that was kind of interesting because it didn't really seem like a Belichick type of thing to do. But even he probably was like, I just want to get out of here. This game is over. I'm not going to win this game tonight. So that was pretty interesting.
That was super interesting. So around the NFL, let's start with 49ers Dolphins. Final score 49ers 33, Dolphins 17. Tua was 18 of 33 for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. They were without Teron Armstead. They were without Austin Jackson. The San Francisco 49ers defensive line forced 14 pressures, sacked Tua 3 times. They hit him 4 times. They hurried him 7 times. He looked rattled from start to finish in that football game. Under pressure, he went 5 for 11 for 42 yards and a pick. The Dolphins finally played a real opponent for the first time in what seems like about 2 months, and they got their asses handed to them. What were your thoughts on 49ers Dolphins?
You take a quick look at the box score and you see, total yards like 308. Dolphins, 8 penalties, 4 turnovers, time of possession, 49ers 40 minutes to the Dolphins 20 minutes. And you just see domination essentially from top to bottom from the San Francisco 49ers here. Held the Dolphins to 33 rushing yards and just forced Tua to beat them all day, and he couldn't, right? They did get a few other plays. Obviously, the first play of the game was a 75-yard touchdown to Sherfield, and then they had another nice touchdown to Tyreek. But other than that, 0 for 7 on third downs, pretty bad, obviously, right there, and the 4 turnovers. So, look, there was that good graphic that Greg put up about when Dolphins play above average defenses, they haven't won games. And when they play below average defenses, they win games. And so this is going to be a narrative that people talk about. Are the Dolphins for real? Are they not? Are they better than the Bills? We think not, obviously. There's still people out there who think they are. And we're going to find out in 2 weeks' time how good the Dolphins really stack up when they have to come to Buffalo in what
Snow.
I would consider, snow, but hopefully more normal circumstances when it comes to the Bills roster at that time. And we'll see how they hold up. Look, if they come into Buffalo and win, I'll tip my cap to them. But ultimately, they played, pretty subpar game against the Niners. And let's not forget, too, that the Niners didn't even have their starting quarterback. They had Brock Purdy in, or their backup. But they did ride Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel pretty well in that game, and the Niners did what they needed to do in that game. Obviously, a tough defensive matchup for the Finns, but it's nice to hear them quiet down a little bit after.
You think Baker Mayfield makes his way to San Francisco? You think he clears waivers and Frisco pulls the trigger? They signed Josh Johnson.
Yeah,
Bills legend Josh Johnson, but.
Yeah, did you see that stat about Josh Johnson's played with more NFL teams than any other player?
Yeah.
He's been on more NFL teams than any other player.
I would love for Josh Johnson to lead them to the Super Bowl against the Bills. That would be amazing. Screw Brock
Baker and Shanahan seem to be a good match as far as like stylistically. I feel like that would be a good match. But I don't know. I think
Christian McCaffrey's going to Christian
Baker
McCaffrey
stinks though. He stinks.
Christian McCaffrey's got to have some kind of like language add into his contract that like makes him de facto GM with all those draft picks they gave up for him.
Maybe plus, he already played with Baker.
Deal. That's what I'm saying.
Right?
Like, you think Christian McCaffrey really wants to do that again?
No.
Like, he's going to be like, guys, come on, no. Let's
here's the thing, right? If you do that, what does that mean for the future of Trey Lance, right? Or is that literally just for this year because you think your roster is good enough and Baker Mayfield?
They're not going to claim him because I don't think they have the money to claim him. He'd have to clear waivers and they probably just give him a minimal deal to finish the year. So I don't think that would mean anything for Trey Lance.
Fair enough. But like, I guess that you'd have to ask the question: could Baker win us the Super Bowl with the roster we have over the guy we already have? And
My guess is they're going to ride Brock Purdy, but the question
Yeah.
is, do you want something in the chamber stronger than Josh Johnson? So
Probably.
that'll be interesting. Pops Mafia says, did Tua get hurt late in the game? I don't think he got hurt. I think he's had a lingering ankle issue all year, and they pretty much use that as an excuse to pull him out as soon as they can in every single game. I've never seen a quarterback handled with kid gloves the way Tua is in terms of injuries. Like that Houston game, they pulled him out, didn't put him back in when it got close. Like the first chance they get to yank him out of a football game, they take it. The guy, no offense, Tua, you're having a really good year, made of freaking glass. I mean, when he gets tackled, it looks painful. Like just the way he gets tackled, the way he gets thrown around a football field, it looks painful. Jessica says, I think the Chargers will beat the Dolphins in the closing moments on Sunday night. I really hope so. But
Chargers
I'll tell you what,
too.
I'm not banking on the Chargers for anything because Brandon Staley, that guy's getting fired this offseason if they don't make the playoffs. And if he doesn't, they're going to have some issues there in Los Angeles. What an epic miss by Tom Telesco not hiring his St. Joe's classmate, Brian Dable. Like he didn't want to wait for the Bills season to be over. So he went and he hired Brandon Staley instead of Brian Dable. What an epic miss for that franchise. What Brian Dable and Justin Herbert could have been. I started to think I'm glad because now Brian Dable is in the NFC with, I don't know, maybe Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, but Brandon Staley might not make it to the end of the year.
It's wild to think about that because the shine has really worn off on the Brandon Staley era in LA. In the early goings, it was like, this guy's super aggressive. We're doing, he's the new type of players coach we want. And he did have some nice moments in various press conferences and in different moments in games as well. But the shine has really worn off on him. And they're really, I know the Chargers have had injuries. I know Bosa got hurt. I know they missed Keenan Allen for most of this year. Mike Williams has been out. They still had Justin Herbert and they still had Austin Eckler. I know their left tackle's been out as well, but they still have weapons and they still have a pretty good defense. They still have Khalil Mack. They still have guys, Derwin James. Like when you're getting talked about in the same conversation as Nathaniel Hackett as far as jobs on the hot seat, that is not a good look for you if you are Brandon Staley. And really, both of those teams, Denver sitting there really just awful, and the Chargers say, hold my beer as we go blow it to the Las Vegas Raiders. So both of those teams in the AFC West, who I thought would be playoff teams this year, both look like they're not going to make the Chargers still could, but
just epically bad from Nathaniel Hackett too. That offense is averaging 14 points per game,
and the most penalized team in the league too, by the way.
Paid Russell Wilson all that money, and it's just Brandon Staley might get fired before Nathaniel Hackett, which is the funny thing too. So
I know I tweeted about that this morning.
Was it okay? So that's why it was in my mind. I think it was you who tweeted that.
Yeah.
So next up on the docket here, Cincinnati 27, Chiefs 24. In the Chiefs' last 5 games against the Bengals and the Bills, they are 1-4. Their only win being 13 seconds. That's the only win they've had in their last 5 games between the Chiefs and the Bills. Mahomes was 3 for 10 for 90 yards when pressured. The Cincinnati Bengals, whether it's Sam Hubbard or whether it's Trey Hendrickson or even our guy Joseph Asai, had a sack on Sunday. 17 pressures, 2 sacks, 6 hits, and 9 hurries on Patrick Mahomes. Pressuring Patrick Mahomes with 4 seems to be the key to defeating the Kansas City Chiefs. The Cincinnati Bengals have done that, plus overhauled their secondary with guys like Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, so they can drop a whole bunch of guys back. What do you think about this game, Cincinnati, Kansas City?
Well, Cincinnati came out firing on offense, obviously got the ball first and went down and scored. This is the thing that's wild to me. The Chiefs averaged 3 points per drive, right? Okay, so you think about how many drives the Chiefs get. Obviously, their points add up in a hurry. In total, they had 8 possessions in this game, and one of those possessions was at the end of the first half where they basically just ran it twice to end the half. So the Chiefs only actually really had 7 possessions in this entire game. So for a team that averages close to 10 or 11 possessions a game and 3 points per possession, you're talking about 10 to 12 points that the Bengals essentially potentially erased off the board for the Chiefs just by possessing the ball as much as they did. And at the end of it, you see it, and they only had 32 minutes of possession. But again, the Chiefs only having 7 true offensive possessions in this game and only 4 in the second half. The Bengals really did a nice job of keep away. And to your point, sat there and my camera went out. Not sure why, but you can still hear me, I think. They sat there and played keep away. And like you said, they dropped those 8 guys in the coverage. And that has historically been the way to beat Kansas City. And Patrick Mahomes didn't have a lot down the field in this game. So hats off to Cincinnati. They seem to have the right formula, and you wonder why others don't really mimic that, because the Bengals seem to have the Chiefs number. I'm gonna try to fix my camera.
Yeah, no, that definitely too. And they just have such a wealth of options too as weapons. Joe Mixon didn't even play. Samaje Perine plays his butt off. They obviously have Jamar Chase coming back, who's just an absolute freak. T. Higgins in his own right. Like, what we want Gabriel Davis to be. Oh, full screen now. This is a little weird, but I think what we hope like Gabriel Davis becomes is what T. Higgins is contributing for the Cincinnati Bengals right now. So you can have your sort of Stefon Diggs, Jamar Chase to go along with your T. Higgins, Gabriel Davis. But then they have that alpha slot in Tyler Boyd as well. So the Cincinnati Bengals just have sort of an embarrassment of riches right now at the skill position. And the combination of that and the combination of the way they seem to be playing the Chiefs time after time defensively, they're a scary team, and they're sneaking up on the AFC. I think it might be tough for them, and it all depends on Lamar's injury. It might be tough for them to even win the NFC North because they have a rather difficult schedule remaining, and the Ravens have a lesser schedule remaining. So I think the Ravens might still be able to squeak out a better record than the Bengals. Then again, who knows? Because the Bengals seem to be like a team that's getting hot at the right time. But even if the Bengals are a 5 seed or even a 3 seed, they are still super dangerous, just like they were, because they are a football team that's getting hot at the right time. And if they can carry that into the playoffs, they can be a force in the AFC. They are a legitimate threat to the Buffalo Bills, and they are a legitimate threat to the Kansas City Chiefs. And it did not look that way early in the season. That retooled offensive line was flailing. Now they're looking pretty solid. Joe Burrow was getting pressured. They weren't really dialing things up on offense. They looked disconnected. It was pretty much the Burrow Jamar Chase show, but they very much have that all sorted out now. And the Cincinnati Bengals are a legitimate threat. So not used to riding this one solo here. So hopefully Dave gets back soon, because my next comment here, or the next topic I want to jump into before we get to Minnesota, the Jets, and a little bit of a preview of the Jets, I want to talk about Odell Beckham Jr. So I want you guys in the comment section to bail me out a little bit, and I want you guys to give me your take on Odell Beckham Jr. so I can read off some of your comments here. Odell Beckham visited the Vikings earlier last week. He visited the Bills on Saturday, and he is in Dallas today. Now, some reports came out that he really wanted to be with the New York Giants. He wanted to go home. He had unfinished business there. There was also reports that, like, if Jerry Jones wants somebody, Jerry Jones will get that guy. And hopefully I got my partner in crime back here. Yeah, I do. Jerry Jones will go out and get that guy. Dallas could probably offer him more money. He's not working out for teams. He's just doing medical checks and visiting with players. All of this, to me, in terms of Odell Beckham, screams it's not so much about 2022. It's about lining up his 2023 and his 2024. I don't think Odell Beckham is going to take a discount or a one-year deal to come win a championship somewhere like Buffalo and then hit free agency again, which is what I think Brandon Beane wants. And I think there's another suitor in the Dallas Cowboys who are willing to offer him that this year, a chance to win a chip this year if he can get on the field, and future years, which I don't know if Brandon Beane's going to want to offer. So, Dave, what are your thoughts on Odell Beckham? I think he ends up with the Cowboys. And comment section, let me know your thoughts as well.
I think he ends up with the Cowboys, but I think it will be, and I think this is the Cowboys chance to essentially put themselves in a position to have a not Chiefs like offense because it's not the same offense, but to have 3 really reliable receivers like they had when they had Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. Like you're basically trying to kind of recreate that with CeeDee Lamb, Odell Beckham, and Michael Gallup now again this year. Not to mention you have Dalton Schultz, Zeke, and Pollard combo with the good. Like the Dallas Cowboys would be going for the Super Bowl in an NFC where it's wide open for them to make it to the Super Bowl, to be perfectly frank. And they're going to have probably a couple home games in the playoffs, playing indoors on the fast track there in Jerry's world. No matter which team Odell goes to, unless it's the Giants, he is going to be, I'll call it the number 2, right? He's not going to be the number 1 with the Bills. He'll be the number 2 behind Diggs or, whatever, 2, 3. CeeDee Lamb is, whatever you think about CeeDee Lamb, he is the number 1 in Dallas, and he's been playing like it for the last several weeks, and he will continue to be the number 1. Would he go back to the Giants, a team that looks like they're probably going to make the playoffs, but that offense is really centered around Saquon Barkley, and that I don't know what kind of volume Odell's going to get in the passing game with Daniel Jones, and are the Giants really a Super Bowl threat this year? So I lean towards Dallas as well, and I think they're the odds-on favorite to land him. But that tells me, if we talk about beyond 2022, that it could be the end of the road for a guy like Zeke Elliott in Dallas if the Dallas Cowboys want to give Odell Beckham a multi-year contract.
And they got to pay Tony Pollard too.
And if you let Tony Pollard out that door, like the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to decide whether they continue to eat Zeke Elliott's contract at what it's at, or if they want to try to pay Tony Pollard. But there's no way both of those guys can be on that roster next year. Like Tony Pollard has made himself a ton of money this year. He looks like the guy with more juice. And if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I probably kind of try to parlay this Odell situation into a chance to possibly move on from Zeke Elliott, which is not going to be something that's easy for Jerry Jones to do. Like, I'm not saying it will be, but tough decisions are going to have to be made if you're the Dallas Cowboys with that, with that group. Yeah. But that's why this year it would be incredible for them, because they would really have a great chance to make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, and it's crazy too. Zeke's already cost them Amari Cooper, and if it now then costs them Tony Pollard too, like that's just really bad GMing from Jerry and Stephen Jones. But Zeke Elliott's cap hit next year almost $17 million. His dead cap 12. So he had $12 million in 2023, $6 million in 2024, and $1.7 million in 2025. So they might just have to. And it's crazy to think that Zeke Elliott is only 28 years old, because the dude runs like he's 35 too. So like that's guy has lost a ton. He's not a bad running back, but he's lost a ton of juice.
Did you hear Collinsworth talking about how like his yards per carry suffers because he gets calls on the goal line? Like, come on, man. Anyone with eyeballs can see that, like, at this stage in their careers, Tony Pollard brings more juice to the field than Zeke Elliott. And I'm not even saying Zeke's a bad running back, but Tony Pollard is a special player, and like he's earned that right to get his paycheck. So
got a couple of questions. Did John Brown actually play? He played, didn't have any targets. Jesse Tennis says, where are things with Crowder? Who knows? That might be something a beat reporter could ask, is like, hey, can we get an update on Jamison Crowder? But fractured ankle, my guess is if he were to come back, it would be late, like last couple of weeks of the season into even maybe possibly the playoffs. And listen, we're not going to dive too into detail with what I'm about to say next, but I'm going to bring it up. And that is, I ran a poll on Saturday, and I said, hey, if this OBJ thing doesn't work out, could you foresee the Buffalo Bills bringing back Cole Beasley? Yes or no? Or would you want the Buffalo Bills to bring back Cole Beasley? Yes or no? I got a lot of angry people in the comment section telling me I'm living in the past, like the Bills haven't already bought AJ Klein and John Brown back. And it was literally like, this guy is the most polarizing figure, like maybe like in Orchard Park, Buffalo Bills history. It was legit, like 4,000 votes, 50-50 split, like 50-50. But I will say, I doubt he comes back. I doubt maybe he even wants to come back to Buffalo. I doubt even if he does come back, he's more than a niche player. Like he's not going to be the alpha slot that an Odell Beckham Jr. would be. He'd be a niche player that maybe like plays like only on third downs, etc. Like he wouldn't be, a dude. He would just be sort of an emergency safety valve type of player. But AJ Klein, what do AJ Klein and John Brown have in common? They reached out to the Bills. AJ Klein reached out to Brandon Beane, said, I want to come back. John Brown sent his tape to Chad Hall, said, I want to come back. So if the Buffalo Bills are struggling at the wide receiver position, they feel like they need that slot production, and Cole Beasley decides to call up Brandon Beane and says, I'll be the bigger man. I want to come back here. I'll do things the right way. Will you have me? I think the Buffalo Bills would maybe consider it. I doubt that Cole Beasley will ever do any of those things. But if he's still got a ton of friends in that locker room, a ton of dudes who will go to bat for him in that locker room, Josh Allen, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, if they can convince Cole Beasley to put on a strong face and put all this stuff aside and go to Brandon Beane, I think there could be like a 5% chance you could see something like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Cole Beasley situation?
I think it's just tough because it's not the same way that like AJ Klein and John Brown left. Now I will say John Brown, they cut him and like that was tough, but there wasn't anything more than business there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the way Beasley left, it was a little murky, right? It was a little murky how he left. There was some tension, some obvious tension between the organization. And I think ultimately this is what it comes down to. And it's Roy's exact point here. Beasley's time has passed. I just don't know what he's got left. And like the same question still needs to be answered about John Brown. Like they did bring him back, but what does he have left? We really don't know. He played in the game, but obviously first game back, didn't get targeted, whatever. We still don't really know what John Brown has left in the tank at this point either. We've seen AJ Klein already play and play pretty decently, but my gut tells me that Cole Beasley just doesn't have anything left in the tank. Now I could be wrong, and he could come back and he could contribute, but I kind of agree with some of these comments in the comments section with Roy and others that I just feel like his time is done.
And this is the conversation that we've had on this show is the Buffalo Bills didn't fail in letting Cole Beasley go. The Buffalo Bills failed in not properly replacing Cole Beasley, because now we're sitting here end of the 2022 regular season, and we're sitting here grasping at straws for somebody to come in and to fill this slot role, this void left by Cole Beasley. So it wasn't the fact that they let Cole Beasley go that was the mistake. It was the fact that they didn't properly replace him. And that's the issue now. And that's the issue that's probably gonna be the number one thing other than staying healthy, because I think our defense is getting healthier. Our defense will get back into form. Other than staying healthy, I think the number one thing that the Buffalo Bills will need to get over the hump and to win the Super Bowl is to figure out something to go to on offense other than Stefon Diggs or Gabriel Davis 60 yards down the field. The Buffalo Bills need to figure something else out. They need some kind of third primary target to step up, whether it's Shakir or Knox or McKenzie or some sort of smorgasbord of all of those guys. They need to figure it out, and it needs to become more consistent. I think McKenzie's had a couple of good weeks in a row. It still looks a little clunky. So it's definitely something that's not going to be permanently fixed, hopefully till the off season. I've already been scouting wide receivers like crazy for the draft coming up. Jackson Smith and Jigma today and declaring was fun. I'd like to think that maybe he slips to the Buffalo Bills in the back half of round one because he sat out all year with a hamstring injury, but Jameson Williams tore his ACL and was drafted 12th overall. So probably not going to happen. But yeah, definitely something that needs to be addressed, but let's move on here. We got the Jets this week, Minnesota 27, Jets 22. To me, the story of the day was the Jets getting high on their own supply, and that supply being Mike White. You saw the players wearing the Mike White shirts, and then you saw Mike LaFleur dial up a game plan which had Mike White drop back 59 times compared to their 23 running plays. And some people were trying to tell me on social media, well, they were trailing the whole game. They had to throw. They weren't trailing that much. They didn't have to throw that much. They got a little too high on Mike White after the game he had last week, and they tried to go out there and pretend like he's an elite NFL quarterback when he is nothing more than a barely serviceable game manager. And I think that if they were more disciplined and they ran the ball more, they would have beaten the Minnesota Vikings. And part of me fears that they're going to learn from their mistakes of last week and they're not going to repeat it this week. Because I would love for Mike White to throw the ball 59 times again this coming Sunday, but I just don't think it's going to happen. What were your thoughts on that Jets loss to the Vikings? And what are your early thoughts previewing them to play the Buffalo Bills this week?
Yeah, I mean, the Jets actually hung around in the first quarter. It was 3-3 after the first quarter. Their defense was playing really well, and they hadn't even gotten Garrett Wilson going yet. They were doing a decent job in slowing down Dalvin Cook early. Obviously, then the Vikings kind of got that 2-touchdown lead, but the Jets were never really out of it, right? I mean, it was the third quarter. The score was 17-6, and it was 17-12, I believe. And so... or 20-12. So the Jets were never out of it to the point where they had to abandon the run completely. So Mike White throwing it 57 times was odd. Now, I will say that to his defense, he is trying to get the ball to his best players, and we've seen him have 2 good games in a row.
He's better than Zach Wilson.
Yeah, and Garrett Wilson getting involved too. So that combo has been working, but at the end of the day, he still threw 2 interceptions and a costly one at the end where the Jets really had a chance to get back in the game. Not to mention they had 3 or 4 chances down at the goal line on a first and second and goal situation, and they couldn't punch it in either. So it didn't deliver in the biggest moments, but the Jets really could have won that game.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very interesting to see how they might overcompensate the other way now coming back this week against the Bills. But I wouldn't expect it to be a 57. I'm not expecting a 57, 59, whatever pass attempts game from Mike White against the Bills.
Being disciplined is what allowed them to beat the Buffalo Bills. Michael Carter and James Robinson ran the ball down our throats in that football game. We all remember that last drive where they worked it down. They just ran the ball down our throats and they kicked that field goal to essentially sort of ice that football game. Then James Robinson was a healthy and active last week for Michael Carter, Bam Knight, and Ty Johnson, which is, it's fine. It's whatever. They had a good game. It was the Chicago Bears, and Bam Knight looks really good, by the way. Your NC State guy, he looks good. I'm not criticizing Bam Knight here, but they've just stopped giving the ball to James Robinson, who's done nothing to deserve a lack of touches, because every time he touches the ball, it seems like
they don't want to give up a better draft pick.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. So discipline allowed them to beat the Bills, and a lack of discipline cost them a game against the Minnesota Vikings. I do think you're going to see them overcorrect, and I do think you're going to see them try to run the ball down the Buffalo Bills' throats this week. All right, ladies and gentlemen, closing things out here. Got a couple more segments here. First is our jabroni of the week. So if you have any jabronis of the week, let's hear them and let's get them out here and let's have some fun with one of our final segments here, our jabroni of the week.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away, and The Rock means 3 seconds away from The Rock to lay the smack down on your candy ass.
Brown, can I stop you though? You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
All right, Dave. Well, who is your jabroni of the week?
My jabroni of the week is the Denver Broncos front office, GM, specifically George Payton. I don't understand, after you just lost to the Tyler Huntley-led Ravens 10-9 after you were winning that game 9-3 for almost the entirety of it, and the offensive performances that you've put forward with this team this year, how Nathaniel Hackett is still employed. I just don't understand it. You are if you're intentionally sabotaging your team to get a better draft pick, you have to remember you don't have one in the first round next year because you traded it to these Seattle Seahawks. And guess what? You're not getting rid of Russell Wilson, for better or for worse. He's your guy. You just traded for him. You gave him the big money. He's not going out the door. So what is the deal in Denver, and why is Nathaniel Hackett still employed as a head coach? Exactly, Mike. Hard to beat that Broncos front office. my best friend is a Broncos fan, texts me every week. This is the week they're going to fire Hackett after the game. They can't possibly keep him after that performance. They can't possibly and he still continues to be employed.
And they actually have a really solid defensive coordinator whose name escapes me, who is on lists because their defense has played really well this year.
Yeah. And they traded away Bradley Chubb.
Yeah,
so
and who's on lists of like guys who'd be considered to be head coaches. So why you wouldn't give this guy a 6-game audition is sort of is beyond me. So it's really crazy what's going on there in Denver. My jabroni of the week is the Houston Texans for a number of reasons. They lost 27-14 to the Browns. Deshaun Watson was a jabroni in his own right with 12 for 22 for 131 and interception. Looked terrible. I hope he looks like that every week. But at the same time, the Houston Texans, led by Lovie Smith, totally qualified for his job in the year 2022, by the way, went from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen, have no pulse whatsoever on offense. And they lose this game 27-14 with Deshaun Watson going 12 for 22 for 131 and interception. Nick Chubb ran for 80 yards and no touchdowns. So how does the Cleveland Browns win this game running away? Punt return touchdown, fumble return touchdown, interception for a touchdown. Just an absolute debacle in Houston on Sunday. And the reason why this sticks in my claw more than anything else is because in 2 of my fantasy leagues, I was playing against the Cleveland Browns defense special teams.
So you're especially bitter after
I'm
that.
especially bitter. I put up 177 points on one of my fantasy leagues this week and lost to a guy who put up 198, all because of the Cleveland Browns defense.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's my jabroni of the week, the Houston Texans, for just completely ruining. I'm the New England Patriots of fantasy football this year. All my teams are like 7-6 and just ridiculously mediocre. But anyway, all right. So now that we've got our jabronis of the week out of the way, let's close things out here. Bills Dolphins flexed to Saturday Night Football. So Saturday, December 17th, 2 weeks from now, at 8 p.m. on NFL Network, the Buffalo Bills will be facing the Miami Dolphins. The forecast calls for about 28 degrees and snow, by the way. Giants Commanders was flexed to Sunday Night Football. What were your thoughts on the Bills being flexed to Saturday night as opposed to Sunday night, and your thoughts on this game in 2 weeks, not to get too far ahead?
I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind the Saturday night game. I also think it makes it, a tougher turnaround for the Dolphins, who are playing on the road, I believe, the prior week in Sunday Night Football. So anything to make their lives a little more difficult. I don't think it affects the Bills too much, whether it was like a 1 p.m. Sunday night, Saturday night. Like, I don't mind the Saturday night slot. Plus, like, get a little more loose on a Saturday night. It's not a work night. So
Yeah.
Mike says good. It's colder at night. So
I can't wait for the Steve Tasker to come back out.
Yeah, it kind of is reminding me a bit like of that Bills Pats game from Christmas Eve, I think, or New Year's Eve. I can't remember. Like, it was Christmas Eve a couple of years ago with a John Brown touchdown. Yeah. So, Dolphins late flight from LA after night game. So, like, they're gonna have
two West Coast games, then a night Sunday, and then a short week Saturday night. So, I'm surprised they're not staying out there in California this week.
Right, and so you talk about that, and look, the Bills came back home on a short week from Detroit. I know it's like a lot quicker of a flight, but yeah, Roy says hopefully the game's on local TV.
It should be on WKBW. Yeah. So if you're in Buffalo or Rochester, the game should be on WKBW. It might be a different one in Rochester, but it should be played locally on broadcast television as opposed to the NFL Network. But yeah, listen, I'm happy it's on Saturday night as opposed to Sunday night, but also sad because I'll be missing my third game this year now because I'll be at a wedding that night. So that was unfortunate. But that I'll be watching it under the table while my friend is during my friend's wedding reception. But so I'll be watching that game on tape delay from my hotel room. But Giants Commanders totally got Sunday Night Football because of their market size. It has nothing to do with the Dolphins playing on Sunday Night Football the week previous or anything like that. It's the New York market. It's the DC market. They got Sunday Night Football. And sadly, because of that, I will have to miss this football game.
And I mean, both of those teams are in the thick of a playoff race. I mean, you like 2 years ago, we'd have been like, great, another NFC East primetime game. But
just an absolute. You
Giants
couldn't
blew
take
it.
your eyes off of that tie. You couldn't take your eyes
Giants
off of
blew it.
it.
Giants really blew that game. I mean, they had multiple chances to win. And guess who? Guess who factored into them blowing it? By the way, Mr. John Feliciano with his taunting penalty, taking away a first down for Darius Slayton that would have had the Giants in field goal range.
Isaiah Hodgins with that touchdown though, look, doing his own little Stefon Diggs impression. That was awfully cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking to support Cover One in any way, shape, or form, the One Pass Club access is the way to do it. For only $57 a year, you get exclusive members-only content, in-depth analysis, including scheme, play-by-play player breakdowns, scouting reports, analytics analysis, access on unlimited devices, and access to the Cover One community and its contributors. We have a ton of awesome conversations on the Slack channels. Eric and Kendall and Anthony do a whole bunch of private YouTube shows and things like that are really super cool. So if you're looking during this holiday season to support the Cover One network, sign up for the Cover One Pass. You get a free cool shirt as well along with your purchase. And that'll about do it for us this evening. Smash that like on your way out. If you're listening on demand, leave a comment in the comment section. We will get back to you over the course of the week here leading up to Bills Jets. And you can always listen on demand if you're somebody who likes to listen on the way to work or at the gym, on all major podcasting platforms by searching Air Raid Buffalo. You can catch us again live Sunday a.m. as the Bills prepare to take on the Jets. We'll be having our live pregame show. Any parting thoughts before we head out, Dave?
No, I mean, this is all, I feel like, culminating into a showdown with Miami on the 17th. Obviously, the Bills really need to take care of business this time against the Jets. Yeah. You do not want to lose the good taste in your mouth you have going after winning these 3 games in a row. And although you'll be at home against Miami in that primetime game, you do not want to go into that game with a bad taste in your mouth. So please just take care of the Jets this time, please, and Mike White, and sit him down a bit.
Take care of the Jets. Take care of the Dolphins, take care of the Bears, take care of the Bengals, and take care of the Patriots. I'm very much on the train of I need this football team. I want this football team to win out. I think if we want to win the Super Bowl, we need the 1 seed, and I think we control our own destiny in that regard right now. We win out, we are the 1 seed. Nobody can take that from us by winning out as well. So the Buffalo Bills need to go about and do their business, take it 1 week at a time, and I'm confident that we can do that. And it all starts, like we said, with New York. And you can catch us live Sunday morning as the Bills prepare to take on the New York Jets. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?